Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and somebody's here. If you'd like to come and say hello in the chat, that would be great. I always start out feeling very nervous and unsure because, number one, the way that I work, the way my style, if you will, or what feels like most like me is I have to let stuff come out. I have an intention, I have my notes. I've been kind of really, contemplating what's the essence of this discussion today, all of that. And then I have to just let it all go and see what shows up. And it's kind of like, the uncertainty of the unknown because I don't know what's going to show up other than, I got my notes here. So that's a good thing. So welcome. And so today, let's see, David's here. Yay. Hello. Sunny day here today. Trust it's fine over your way. It's been a beautiful, misty day. It's sort of like one of those misty, moisty mornings. Cloudy is the weather. And, but I've had eagles. I have eagles that live up or are visiting up just behind me. So it's been really wonderful to hear the eagles. They woke me up this morning, which was rare. So it's delightful to have those there. I'm glad to hear it's sunny in your neck of the woods. Hi, Marge. I'm glad you're here. And you know what the weather's like because you're right here too, or close by anyway. So today, the topic of our conversation today is called spirituality. What's the point? So this whole month, I'm talking about spirituality, and I'm actually going to talk about it next month in terms of specific elements of this reality that we live in and this aspect of our life that we call spirituality. So I'm going to talk about stuff again, the clarity of all that, most of which has been outlined in different places, but we'll get to that. But last week on February 3rd, I talked about spirituality and what did I talk about? Wherever you go, there you are. In a sense, there's a spiritual aspect of yourself. Hi, Fred. Nice to see you. There's an aspect of ourselves that is spiritual in nature. We have a sensual nature. We have a sexual nature. We have all kinds of elements or aspects of ourselves that we are here to, in a sense, maybe cultivate or develop and learn more about ourselves and be the expression of that. When we're expressing our sensuality, we're expressing the way that we experience the world through our senses. And the same goes with our sexuality. We're expressing ourselves through this thing that we call sex or sexual uh, aspects of ourselves. It doesn't necessarily mean sexual as in preferences or gender things. It's so much bigger. And the same with our spiritual self is we have this knowing or this sense of self that is beyond our physical 3D reality, and we want to get in touch with that. And my sense of it over the decades, almost 7 decades that I've been doing doing this human thing, is that there's an aspect of ourselves that is not we're not clear about because it doesn't make sense in in our consensus reality to say that we are divine, that we are part of a universal source of all that is, and that me myself is here to learn to grow myself into the fullest capacity of myself in this form as a divine being, as the expression of God. In the book movie Eat Love Pray, Elizabeth, and I don't remember the author's name, says, God dwells in me as me. And it's a non dual approach, but I think it all fits together eventually. But we're not going into that conversation of dual, non dual. But if God dwells within me as me, then I'm the fullest expression of the divinity, as is everyone. So we are all that element of love. We are all that element of beauty and the expression of kindness and compassion and creation and creativity, so much that we have capacity for. And the ways that we limit ourselves gets in the way, and that's what limits us is that relationship we have with the consensus view of reality, we look outside and we go, um, we look at the politics, we look at news, we look at the Olympics, we look at what we're looking, and we have this whole immersed lifestyle in relation to what we see around us and what we've made sense of and what we interpret. And this part of us that has a knowing of ourselves beyond that, it's gets complicated because we don't have an orientation that gives us permission to explore that. We do and we don't. In a sense, our religions are a form or a foundation or an institution where that was created so that we could get to know ourselves in relation to God or the divine aspect of ourselves. But quite often, the rules, the principles, the dogma, the rituals, the practices are not meant, in essence, to know our own unique spiritual expression in relation to our divineness. We're taught to, in a sense, be like everyone else and practice like everyone else. And if we don't, then it's a sin, or we're not doing it wrong, or all kinds of things and bad things and good things. And we get scared. So we were talking about all of that last week in terms of kind of just like, what's it all about? And wherever we go, we have this dilemma that most of us have a sense of our knowing, but we don't know how to touch into that. I had a fellow who has been a client of mine, and he's been in my life for probably 12 years, and we worked together as a client. He was my client for probably 3 or 4 years. I'll call him Ernest, and he's just an amazingly wonderful, radiant being. And he moved to Israel, and after 8 years or 10 years, he called me, and 8 years, and said he'd like some sessions. And so he realizes he's got a really good life and he's happy, he says, but there's something missing. And he doesn't understand what that is that's missing because he's got everything. He's got great house and he's got his family is great. He's got his work is great. Everything's great, but something's missing. And this is generally quite often the beginning of a spiritual quest, if you will. This is where we begin to open up to what is that and how do I get there? How do I find that? Or what do I, why do I, all this, like, what's the point of all that? And so Ernest is at that place where he's going, it doesn't make sense because I got everything. Why would I feel like something's missing? And when we talked about what life would be like if he didn't have that thing missing, he talked about equanimity, that there would be this sense of quietness and knowing and solitude and presence, regardless of whether he was with his family or his business, those kinds of things. And so I honed in on that part of him that's like that has this knowing that if there was this equanimity, that life would feel more full for him. And so when I talk to him about that, and that there's this knowing, and it's connected to the intuition, like our intuition's talking to us all the time. There's an intuitive knowing, and where we get inspired, or connected, or a calling, all of these elements of ourselves that are part of this knowing. And so I was talking to him about that, and that what we're all up to, but him particularly, is cultivating a relationship with this knowing so that he can cultivate more. Actually, he's not doesn't even know the state of better, and he wants to be more in the state of equanimity. So in the conversation of that, he asked me this question. He said, "So do all of us have this knowing?" And I said, "Yeah, because we all are these eternal beings. We're all energy. We're all this divine energy that's eternal, and we are that. So we already have the knowing of ourselves as that, but it gets so lost and clouded by all of the all the teachings and all the history and all of the database in a sense that we're flooded in, where we are these little computers when we come into the world, where this brand new computer, and then all of a sudden what we're plugged into all of these apps and these downloads and these things that are just part of reality. And uh we just have to be, that's the world. We forget that we are these spiritual beings, these divine beings, and we just are this now. How do I survive? We have a sense of adrenaline and a sense of fear, the sense of anxiety, and how do I manage that within myself? And so we're all in this domesticated uh, place of managing and surviving. And for quite a while, most of us, I mean, there are some of us apparently, as children, we remember who we are, but we don't have a place to talk about that, because most people go, "Oh, you're just making that up." But when we have that knowing, I believe, is with us, we have the opportunity to grow that knowing, and that for me is this path of spiritual development, or the development of spirituality, or the relationship with our spiritual self, and our willingness to be the fullest expression of our divine essential nature. I listened to Paul Selig, his and the books that he writes. I listen to them on Audibles, and Paul Selig channels Melchizedek, or the guides, and their whole message is, you are here in a sense. Your purpose is to be the expression. Your service in the world is to be the expression of your divine self. We talk about, many of us want to know what our life purpose is. My life purpose is to be a doctor, or my life purpose is to be a coach, or my life purpose is to be a mother or a father, or those specific elements. And in watching the movie Soul, I've watched it 3 times now, and the main character, he feels like his life purpose is to play the piano, and through that he's just so immersed in this flow, and he loves that. But then when it's time to go home, life is life. Like, wait a second, now what do I do? And that was the question for him. Now what do I do? Now that I've arrived and I'm doing what I love, now what? And the woman said, "Yeah, I'll see you next week at 8 o'clock. I'll see you at the same time that, or tomorrow." And it's like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And it's that question I think so many of us have is, what do I do with myself, when I'm not being a doctor or a mom or a dentist, or a dog keeper, or whatever that is? What do I do? And what's the point of my life purpose? What's the point of anything? And it's a constant question. I'm scratching my head because it's a constant question. So, so part of what we're looking for in this process is, in focusing on spirituality. At some point, m- for me, like I said, the innate nature of us is this sense of knowing. And when I'm talking to you right now, but in terms of talking to you, I'm talking to that part of you that has this knowing, and how you want to cultivate that relationship with that knowing. It's very personal, it's very individual, it's very your way, and not anyone else's way. No one religion can tell you this is the right way or this is the wrong way. They all try, and all these spiritual traditions that we have, I laugh because there's thousands of them, and they say this is the right way or this is the right way. But each of us has our own unique way. And for us to grow that capacity and the willingness to to take that path, march to the a different drummer, take the path less traveled, those are elements of that process of, how do I do that? How do I be the expression of that in the world? And it's very challenging. So one of the see what let me come back to my notes here. Um, when we look at spirituality, most of us have the sense of, okay, so what my point is, or what I want out of this developing my spirituality is, I want enlightenment. We think that's the goal is enlightenment. And another goal is I want to know my life purpose. Another goal is I want to be happy. Another goal is I want no suffering. If I'm a spiritual person and I'm doing it right, there will be no suffering in my life. I'll be happy and I'll be enlightened. And in that place of enlightenment, there's no suffering. And the degree to which that's true is the degree to which that's true. And we are all pretty much beginners on this path. We're all at the beginning of this place. There's a two elements of this. We're already enlightened because we're already this knowing. We're already this high self inside. We're already that. Nisargadatta, a guru person, says, "I am that," and that's what Paul Selig's work says. We're already this, and how we cultivate relationship with this in such a way that we become more that in our life. That's the practice. And the Dalai Lama says kindness, just if nothing else, kindness is the easiest, as in the simplest practice to say, hey, just be kind to yourself and others. Just notice the intention to be kind, or notice the intention to be unkind. Notice the intention to attack somebody. You're just because they are who they are, not because they did something wrong, but just like somebody's there. I'm a little irritated. I'm going to attack, as opposed to, oops, I'm about to attack. Can I withdraw? Can I withhold? Can I bring it back in and come back with kindness? David says life is like a play where we have so many character roles that we become like a method actor. We tend to put our best foot forward for others to see, but forget our shadow side, holy wholeness. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, David, in that um, who we are in our identities and our roles and our masquerades. And we put these on, whether it's for with our children or with our partners or with life, with with our money and bank accounts or with our politics. We have all, like you're saying, we have all these roles. But who are we when we disconnect from and dismantle all these identities, when we take ourselves out of the character and we're off stage? And again, that's the knowing, if you will, when we're off stage and we're no longer the identity of a mom, the identity of a friend, the identity of a life coach, or our identity with our bank accounts or our cars or whatever those are. When we can disconnect from that, who are we? And it gets pretty scary for people to consider that. But at some point, we do. We have to, because it comes up. Today I did an interview with uh, um, with two women about aging and midlife, and they asked me about midlife crisis. And midlife crisis is in many ways a spiritual crisis or a crisis of meaning, because it's like, wait a second, I'm doing everything right by the book. I've got the right money, I've got the right spouse, I've got the right car, I've got the right number of kids, I got the right dog, I got the right everything, I got the right haircut. And much like Ernest, it's like something's missing. And it's like, how is that possible? How is that possible? I'm doing it all right, but it doesn't feel right. Something's missing. And in that process, we begin to dismantle, if we can, and if we've got support. And I think that's one of the great things about YouTube and so many resources in the world today, is we have the support to start to question reality, question consensus view, consensus right, wrong, good or bad, consent, all of the things that create those characters, that the roles that you're talking about, David, create the way that we act out that role. All of those things are up for question. I talk a lot about my role as a mother, and I go, hi, this is I want motherhood. I want to experience my motherhood. And it's like, well, I don't actually have a child to play the role. in the way that I get to play my role the way I want to play my role. And this is a dilemma for so many people, not only in terms of parenthood per se, but perhaps in terms of other parts of their lives. Perhaps they want to be an actor or a singer or a musician, but there's something that they don't have out there that gives them the ability to act that out in a way that they want to. So we question those realities and we get mad at the world and we get mad at other people and say, "You're not letting me do this." And it's like, okay, well, maybe the way that I'm, like you're saying, the method actor, maybe the way that my method of parenting, the way that my motherhood is wanting to get expressed or has been, the method of that isn't working for me or my children. And so I have to question that and disconnect from that method so that I can a mother or a parent, a good sense of that. My connection is unstable, so hopefully you guys are hearing this okay. But it's a challenge to come to this place of, okay, this it doesn't work anymore. This way of thinking isn't working. Uh, um, what's his name? One of my favorite, Will Smith, says that he as he's 53, I think now, or something like that, 54. But he says as he's gotten all this wealth and this fame, he realizes there's something missing. And so he's taking his life on a different path. And I've seen this and heard this from other actors and people who are famous or people who have gotten wealthy. And it's like, yeah, this isn't fulfilling. There's something else. And and so there's the what's the point thing about life. And we get to that point, we go, what's the point with the way it is? And then when we start on the spiritual path, there's a point where we go, what's the point of this? So I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to come back to Marge. She says, well said, Dan. And then she says, then those roles become so comfortable in them, we think that's us. Yes, that's great, Marge. Those roles that we imagine ourselves in, we believe that's us. And the more that we can see ourselves in the higher knowing, in the highest truth that we can experience within ourselves, which might not be very much, but more than just saying, I know I'm not that. I know I'm not act that actor, uh, or I'm not that role, because we come on to every lifetime we come onto the stage and we play the roles, and then we get off the stage between lives. We take off that costume, and now we're without the costume. We're roleless, and that's a very cool, for me, a really cool metaphor, because it's like, who am I when I'm not in costume, when I'm not in acting, when I'm who am I? And so that's the one thing that I'm continue to cultivate or to live into, is that into the question of who am I when I'm not that? And it's huge. It's huge because it influences all my relationships. I realized that that I kind of think this is true for most people, that we have developed relationships with other people, and generally it's an unrequited love relationship. So with our parents, when they don't see us, hear us, or get us, when they're too busy, they've got their other important things to take care of, we feel that we're not being met. And if our bosses don't meet us, see us, hear us, we feel we're not getting met. And so unrequited relationships are basically where we're not getting met. We extend ourselves, but other people are not extending themselves in the same way to the same degree. And so we feel like it's unrequited. And so I realized the degree throughout my whole life, the common denominator of life for me in relationship is this unrequited love. I'm putting myself out there. I'm putting myself out there. I'm putting myself out there. And I'm not getting back what I expected to get back. And so I feel pissed off, angry, lost, lonely, blah, 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 blah. but the point is like, okay, if with the realization, this is the disidentifying from all these roles and these characters that you're talking about, David, with the realization, like, oh yeah, that's all that unrequited love stuff. Then why do I do what I do? If I'm doing it to get love, to get appreciation, if I'm doing it to get, I'm doing it for the wrong reason. When I'm in my highest self, I know my highest self in that place of the fullest expression of my essential nature, my divine nature, that's what I want. And so if I love because that's the expression of my divine nature, that's what I do. If I do these lives because this is an expression of my divine self, that's what I do. And so being able to distinguish, am I doing what I'm doing to get love, or am I doing what I do because this is who I am? This is the essential me, the essence of me. David says the method actor is running a program, thus reactive when distracted. A natural person is not conformed to a narrative, thus adaptable to each moment with change. I think it's called being flexible. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the degree to which we are constrained by our orientation, much like what you're saying, Marge, and this is the role, and this is how you play the role. Um, it's so constraining. There's no flexibility, and so there's a lot of frustration and angst and anger and all the rest of it. But when we can go, okay, wait, here's how I've been playing that role, and maybe I could play it differently. That's where the flexibility comes in. But what that requires, like most of us, and I think what you're saying, is there's a fear aspect of this. We know the method that we've been using works to the degree that it works, but we realize that our life isn't satisfying with what this amount of work is, and so we want to grow that capacity to be flexible, but that means that we have to let go of our attachment to the way that we've been being. And that gets scary because we go, I don't know who I am without doing it this way. I don't know who I am if I'm wearing a different costume. I don't know who I am. I don't know how to do that. And that's where the leap of faith comes in, that we are saying, okay, this isn't working, much like Ernest is saying, this isn't working. I'm wanting more equanimity, but I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to bring that into my life, but I want it. And if we know we want that expansion, the ability, the flexibility you're talking about, David, is that place of the flexibility to accept or allow something else to come in. Now we have to kind of make room by letting go of that attachment. And most of us don't want change because change is attached to the idea of attachment. If I have change, I got to give something up. I have to sacrifice. But if we say, "Here's what you want," then then it's not a sacrifice so much to give up what you're afraid to lose. Yoda says, "Train yourself to let go of what you're afraid to lose." And this is a big part of a spiritual practice. I use that mantra all the time because I'm always facing that part of how can I be more flexible? I want them to be more flexible. I want them to be more flexible. I want them to be more flexible so that I can stay the same. That's what we really want. We want people to change. We get mad at people because they're being the way they are and they're not letting me be the way I want to be, as opposed to, oh, they're being the way they are. And I have to look at how I am being in relation to those people, so that I'm actually having this place of equanimity where I can have a place of openness and expansion to who they are, what is, and feel a sense of peace. Now, it's not that easy because quite often we have to face these challenging places of really looking at where am I constrained? Where am I limiting myself? Where am I holding on to? Where am I being attached? And my whole conversation about motherhood has been up for me for a bit. And so I have to keep asking myself those questions. And quite often, like reactively, it comes back to if only my children would A, B, and C, or they're not letting me A, B, and C. It's like I gotta look at those patterns because those are the patterns, the reactive patterns that are part of the method of being me. And we all face those things. So, the challenge coming back to what's the point of the spirituality? What's the point? It's like we have this method actor persona that we've been wearing. We go, this is kind of boring. This is kind of not growing my capacity as a being to be more of an expression of a character. And so we go, well, what do I need to do, or what do I need to practice so that I can be the expansion of this character, this being inside? And so we begin the process of asking those questions. That we have that sense of wanting an answer, like, okay, here's how we fix it, or here's what we do. Here's the spiritual practice. You got to meditate, do yoga, you got to do this, you got to pray 14 hours a day, all of those things, but it doesn't necessarily change the dynamics to do all of those things. I know a lot of people who meditate in the morning, but they are not mindful throughout the day of their negative thinking. So one of for me, the simplest practice is what is sorry, I'm thinking 14 things at the same time, but I've mentioned many times that in other lives and videos that there's a statistic that says 80% of our our ideations, 80% of our thoughts are negative in nature. 80%. Now, from a divine perspective, nothing is negative. In a sense, we might feel angry or upset or despair and anguish, but that's actually an expression of God too. We might hate, we might have jealousy, we might have these feelings, but that's an expression of the divine too, because there's nothing separate. There's nothing outside of the universe. There's nothing outside the universe. If we talk about multi-universes, there's nothing outside the multi-universes. We're all in this, and every expression is an expression of divinity, the divine. But what we make as wrong or bad or hard is what we choose to interpret as that. And I said all that, and now I forget the point I was making. So if you could help me out, let me know. Um, so I forget what I was saying. I'll come back to it. Um, we expect spirituality to give us something, and I was thinking about this, that there's two elements of this too, that there's the romance of spirituality. There's a sense of, like, if you go into a church, and especially a cathedral, that's this beautiful, like if you think about Notre Dame in Paris, the it's just such an exquisite experience just to be in that. There's a romance, there's a mystery, there's an awe, there's a beauty, and we are allured towards spiritual practices because of that. I know I was speaking about meditation as a practice, um, but we're lured by the romance of the idea of meditation or prayer. We're lured by the what will come from this, and we think about the romance of falling in love, and we can do that, and I have done that in terms of my spiritual practices. And that's what quite often has kept me on the path, is that I am still in love and fascinated with this unfolding of myself in this aspect of myself called spirituality. But we sometimes we go into meditation or prayer, and we're in that for a period of time, and we come out, and we lose awareness. We're not mindful for the rest of the day. My meditation, in essence, is I wake up in the morning and I do some reading and contemplating in that, and sometimes some writing. But I carry that mindfully as best I can throughout my day, so that when I have a negative thought, and I can feel it, my body senses is different when you're in a negative thought or negative whatever. your body feels different. You know the difference when you're in a thought of happiness, or like David says, it's sunny where he's at. It's like, woo, that feels great. And that we know the difference between that and a negativity and a negative thought. So, but if we're not mindful of negativity, then we're not, in a sense, able to practice just the small elements, but make such a difference to shift from being 80% negative in the world to maybe only 65% negative in the world. What a difference that would make. What a difference it does make. I've done that, and I continue to watch my the capacity for positivity to grow. So quite often, my ability to be in the positive, it was very challenging at first because I was so immersed in negativity. My whole world is is about victim and whatever, but negative, like the oppression. But as I grow my capacity to let go of negativity, I grow my capacity to experience positivity. So much like we were talking about originally, it was sunny where you're at. And I've been watching the day today, been misty and soft, like soft and beautiful all day. And it's not sunny and it's not necessarily warm, but the quality of that is a positive in my life. It's a loveliness rather than like, oh man, where's that sun? It's not here. And meh, meh, meh. So the point, I'm sorry, because I got off track there. The point was there's a simple practice of to to stop ourselves from floating into the negativity, floating into, in a sense, that character that we've been playing that has been upset and upset and blaming and shaming and judging that character role and going, yeah, no, I'm going to stop playing that role because actually it's not very fun anymore and it's not growing my capacity to allow in more beauty and more love and more kindness and more playfulness and more happiness. The more I recognize this negativity, whatever it is, the more I can source into the negativity and go, yeah, no, I don't need to do that anymore. And sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes there's this detachment that's happening that's really challenging. And it brings up emotions and it brings up the past and it brings up traumas. And so at that point, people go, "What the fuck?" Excuse the expression. Well, what's the point? This hurts. This is frustrating. This is not getting me anywhere. Quite often, people will come to me as a transformational coach and spiritual coach or whatever, and go, "Hey, I'm stuck, and I don't like this. I've been on the spiritual path, and it's not working, and I'm stuck." And I go, "Yeah, I totally get it. I've I've been there. I know those places. It's frustrating as hell, as hell. It is hell sometimes." And it's like, what's the point? And if we don't have a sense of a greater trajectory, then what's the point makes sense. And it's like, yeah, just stop doing any of that. Just go back to your old life. Just go back because there's no point. There's no trajectory. So part of my intentions of doing these lives is to have a point of reference that says, yeah, it's this is challenging, and we know that I know that I am this knowing, that I am this eternal being, this divine self. I know that because I do. And I know that there's this part of me that still wants to be immersed in all the identifications of this life on the planet. I want the house and I want the kids and I want the husband and I want the stuff. I still want that. And I have to see that in relation to the higher self, and I'm that's the challenge for so many of us. And at some points I go, I don't why is this all happening? And I've been doing this for a long time, but the questions still come. And then I have to go, yeah, there's a level of knowing that I'm growing myself into. There's a level of, in a sense, enlightenment. There's a level of understanding. There's a level of truth that I'm growing myself into, that I'm not quite there yet. But I'm on this path long enough that when people come in and go, yeah, I'm stuck. or I'm lost, or I'm disconnected and I don't know where to go. And I go, yeah, I know those places. It's like I've been on the path long enough that I can help guide people through this stuckness or through this aloneness or through this questioning period. And I love this work because it's not like I'm about to help people get off the path or fix it or get enlightened. It's not my job. My job is to say, yeah, I know where you are on the path, and that makes total sense that you're experiencing this right now. And what's your trajectory? What's your truth? What's your knowing? And when we get aligned with our knowing, then we have this capacity then to keep going in that direction. But quite often when we lose that sense of knowing, and I lose it because I do, because I'm human, circumstances show up and I go, "Wah, I want that, I want that, I want that." And I go, wait, wait, stop. It's challenging. David says negativity is a natural primal function from times of living in the wild with all the dangers. It appears an instinctual function. When we meet a stranger, we are careful until they are known. Yes, and we can be careful, but we don't have to be negative in a sense. Um, um, when, again, this is sort of when we're in our knowing self isn't in a negativity, it's in a positivity. And I can uh, meet a stranger and not have to go on the defense and not have to go to that person's going to hurt me. That person's going to harm me. That person is dangerous. I don't have to go there. I can be cautious or I can be, in a sense, wary, but I can calm that way down because the database historically right now in my life is those people aren't going to show up. And so I don't have to be that armored and that ready and that prepared for negativity, a negative response. This is part of when we look again at the knowing of the self. That eternal self doesn't live in through the history, but we can go, yeah, no, afraid of lions and tigers and bears on where I live. And so I don't go out. I went into the woods today with Gracie, and it was wonderful because I, there's no lions and tigers and bears. I'm safe. So I can see, oh, those are those, like you're saying, it's instinctual, but I go, it's instinctual, but it's it's not necessary. It's instinctual, but it's not necessary because I'm growing this capacity to not live in that alarm because I'm training myself to not live in that alarm. I'm training myself to not live in the trauma or trauma triggered. I'm training myself to live someplace different. And that's part of this practice is when is it important? When do we need to be aware and use our instinctive nature to take care of ourselves? But when is that a pattern of the data to this current moment for ourselves? Something that each and every single one of us has to but and so when we think about a negative thought, we can say, yeah, that's primal. And in this moment, when I'm talking about a primal self versus the spiritual self, it's just like we're asking those questions. I don't have the answers for it, but the question then comes up is it necessary for me to go to that primal function? Or can I train myself, train my mind to say, yeah, no, there's no harm here. And it's that practice of questioning and discerning for ourselves, each one of us, where is there harm? Where is there danger? I grew up Catholic, so the whole patterning of sin and hell has been, it's just been part of my life for from the beginning. And when I decided to let go of that orientation and that particular religion, it was like, yes, but will I go to hell? And I don't know if I'll go to hell, but my preference is to live in a reality or a truth where I'm not going to worry about that. That well-being and my capacity to be an expression in the world, I have to say, I don't care if I go to hell in the positive way, in a sense, I'm not going out there to hurt myself or other people, but being the fullest expression of myself, I'm willing to risk that I'm not going to go to hell. I have to willingly risk that choice. I have to take a leap of faith and say, okay, my belief says there is no hell. My belief says something else. So we have to look at and question our truths and our principles. What are we doing here? Why are we here? And those are all very personal answers. And finding that place, like, when I'm in a state of grace, I'm happy. I want to be in a state of grace more often. That's my trajectory. And I want to know myself in the fullest potential of that. Okay, great. So I feel a negativity and I go, is it necessary for that to be a concern? No. Okay, great. Can we get back on task in holding and staying in this state of grace? Yeah, but what if? Yeah, what if? And that's what we do. It's like, yeah, but what? And then we're armored and we can't come back to this state of grace. Gracie's saying, are you talking about me? So this is part of that challenge. The dilemma is we go, this is what I want. And this is what I know. I can't tell you the number of people that say, I know I am loved. I know that God is my source. I know all of this. But what if? And that's that state of no change. We sit on the fence and go, I really want this and I want to believe, but so this is a great point, David, because we're so caught in the database of our history in the past and the primal functionings that have brought us. But we have a greater brain that says we don't have to be afraid right now. Marge says, what helps me is seeing the sacred being in those I meet when I remember. That's nice. Perhaps the intuitive mind, nice, might save oneself by nipping something in the bud before it embeds itself in our life. I love that, David. Awareness of the danger perhaps is not a negative thing, but more one's strength. Yes, sir. I love it. I love it. I have a client. She's doing great work on herself. Really great work, and a circumstance has showed up in her life that's from like a past pattern. The method actor. She's having an opportunity to use that method actor that she was, and so she sends me a text and says something like, "What's going?" Which is just a little bit about what's going on, and she said the police came to my door. I didn't answer it because I was in a panic, but blah blah blah. And then later I checked in and said, "How's it going?" And she said that the police hadn't come back, but she realized that she was about to enter a dangerous situation. And it was great because she was able to reveal to herself, like, it's metaphorically the police came in or were called her on her door, called to her door, but that the danger was that she was about to enter into a past kind of way of being in the world that she didn't want to. And it was so beautiful for her to enter that level of awareness that kept her from acting um, out of alignment with her highest self, her highest truth, her highest knowing. So that was great. One of the reasons people do spiritual stuff, it's my heart's working really hard in a good way. It feels really good when you guys chat with me. It feels really good. So thank you. Um, one of the things that we think will happen when we get spiritual is we can take what's called a spiritual bypass, that we can do all the spiritually right things and we won't have to deal with our humanness. And we can forego pain and suffering. We can forego um, challenges. We can forego hard stuff. It'll be easy if we just get spiritual enough. And that's something that a lot of people take on. And they also take on this thing called spiritual arrogance, where it's like, oh, well, I'm practicing Buddhist, or I'm a practicing Methodist, whatever we're practicing, and we go, oh, I have a higher self. I'm higher than you because I'm practicing A, B, and C. You're only practicing K, L, and R, whatever it is. But those places where we take on an arrogance because we think we're better than, because we're doing something, we're doing spirituality. In the practice of being in spiritual, it's just like the practice of being spiritual, so different than doing spiritual. Do you guys do you guys know what I'm talking about? It's like it's like sexuality. That is, I haven't talked about that in any of my videos yet. It has not been a theme yet for a month, for months of videos or lives, because my relationship with my sexuality is is I'm not happy with it. And I can do sex. I'm really good at doing sex, but in terms of who I am in my sexuality, very challenging. So I'm not ready to talk about that. But that's the same with spirituality in a sense. It's very easy to do spiritual, just meditate or mantras or pray or do kind things for people. It's that doing element. But when you're actually being in it, it's very different. When you're being kind, it's very different than doing kind. When you're being generous of spirit, very different than doing generous. When you're being loving, when you're being in love, very different than doing, this is what you're supposed to do. If you're a spiritual person, this is what you're supposed to do. And when people come and say, "Yeah, I've been spiritual for a long time," and I just laugh. Sorry, um, because we're all doing spiritual. I'm doing spiritual. If I talk to somebody, they'll laugh at me because in this moment I'm laughing at myself because I go, "Oh yeah, I'm doing that. I'm doing that." But how am I being? Well, I'm being arrogant. I'm being judging. I'm being holier than yet, holier than thou, and that's all funny. And there's no humility in that. And part of spirituality, the practice of spirituality is owning the humanity because we're in this human experience. There's You can't get out of that. And then there's so many spiritual traditions that go, yeah, no, you can just kind of avoid all that and just do the spiritual thing and that'll get you where you want. And I've experienced quite a few people that's huge dilemma for them because they go, what do I do? I got this thing, I got this stuff, I've got this, and there's no place for it. And it's the sort of the opposite of people who go, "I got all this, but I don't know what to do with this knowing, this delight, this relationship I have with." There's this something that I can't describe or I can't talk about. I'm not allowed to. A lot of people who have had spiritually transformative experiences, they don't talk about it forever, perhaps, because there's no safe place to talk about it. So, there's both of those. There's the spiritual bypass that says, I don't need to talk about my humanness. I don't need to deal with my humanness. I just have to stay up. I'm not, I don't get angry and I don't hate anybody and I love everybody. But what's going on inside is not a reflection of that. And at some point, that just becomes unmanageable, basically. It becomes unmanageable. Um, a friend of mine who's in his 90s, his wife uh, is developing, has had Alzheimer's, but has progressed. The Alzheimer's is progressing, and she fell down a couple months ago and broke her hip, and um, he's challenged because she is off island, and he can't see her all the time because she's like an hour and a half away relative to the space and distance where we are. Um, and he's challenged, and I bring that up because we think that again, if we're spiritual, that this will be easy, that these kinds of situations will be easy, and it's not. And that's part of our growing. It's that about Earth University is, oh, here's the next class of, the master class in humanity is being with with your beloved partner who is now very far away, and here you are, you know, 91 years old. What the hell do you do? And what's the point of living? And what's the point of this degree of anguish and despair and loss and fear? What's the point of all that? It's like, where's the spirituality in that, Rosie? Like, come on. And it's like, hell yeah, that's right. Hell yeah, you're right. What's the point? What's the point? But what I know is that, and I'm being graced with the opportunity to sit with this human being, to sit with him and be a witness to him while he's in this human experience. And my experience is that the more that I do this human experience, the more grace I experience within this human experience, the more I'm feel honored to um, have to deal with these frustrations and the anguishes and the losses that, and the attachments and all of those things that, people would say that when I was younger, and I'd go, yeah, whatever, just forget it, I'm not going there. Like, that's really stupid to think that way. But my own experience, and when I get that this, we're here to have a spiritual being having a human experience so we can learn and grow and have this amazing opportunity to be an expression of the divine here in the world, whatever that means, then I'm sitting with this human being, the spiritual being, in this moment of a human expression of anguish and fear and isolation and loneliness and despair. And in that is, there's a divinity in that, truly. We can't know it until we're in it. And I've heard many people who have gone through major cancers and other really terrible, horrible things, and they come out going, "Yeah, I never would have faced myself, and I would have never faced those elements of myself had this not happened." And they're grateful that they had the experience. And I could say that, and you're gonna go, the FY word comes up and says, "Yeah, no, don't wanna look forward to that." And I go, "Yeah, it's a good thing, you know?" It's not like it's we're all here to have the experience that we're here to have. And so it's good to have a sense of, okay, this is the truth of this experience. It's anguish and horrendous. And in the expression of that, something else is happening. Um, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers would say, if it is human, it can be mentioned. And I'm not quoting, so, but something like this. And I just watched the movie the other night again. And it's like, if it's human, it can be mentioned. If it can be mentioned, it can be talked about. And if it can be talked about, it can be managed. And that's a really good thing. But I love that if it's human, it can be mentioned. And the ability to mention it is just an extraordinary experience that many people don't allow themselves to experience. So, what's the point? We're here to experience the fullest expression of our essential nature, and seeing where we limit ourselves and constrain ourselves to the methods and the roles that we've played, and being able to go, yeah, no, that doesn't work anymore, because what I really want is this. And being able to know this and know where we're not giving ourselves this, that's a really good thing. And again, coming back to just the simplest practice, which is notice when you're having negative thoughts and saying stop, because that will give you the opportunity to begin to expand your capacity for positive thoughts. And I can't tell you how awesome it is to see what shows up when you make room for it. It's such a pleasure, honest to God. Honest to God, it's a true pleasure. So I'm grateful that, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm extraordinarily cynical and resistant. So if you're listening to me and I sound like I'm some sort of like highfalutin, yeah, 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 it's like, nah, no, I'm really resistant, really cynical, really challenged to risk and live in faith and take those leaps of faith. But every time I have, it's been a really, really great thing. So thanks for being here, you guys. If you haven't already given me thumbs up, that would be great. That lets me know and lets YouTube know that my work is valuable here. And if you feel like this would be something to share with other people, please do so. And also down in the description below, I have a boot camp called Inward Bound Boot Camp to Self Transformation. And the boot camp would be really great for any of you who are starting on this process or even in the midst of this process, because it's really an incremental step by step of how to develop these skills that we're talking about, of knowing the difference. Here's what I want, and here's what's in my way, and all sorts of things. So very incremental, very, this is a caterpillar, by the way, and it goes into a cocoon and then into a butterfly. So we talk about that. All right, you guys, thanks again very much. I'm glad you're here. Bye for now. Oops.